The gunshot echoed across the Montana prairie as Valerie Everett slumped against the boulder, clutching her bleeding side, the blood seeping through her fingers as dark as the memories that haunted her. Escape was all she'd known for 3 years since the fire that had taken everything: her home, her family, and left her body a canvas of scars that no proper lady would dare show. Now, in 1878, with a bounty on her head for a crime she didn't commit, she wondered if death would finally claim her here, beneath the vast, indifferent sky of the frontier. "Don't move," a deep voice commanded. Valerie froze, not from the order but from pain. Through blurred vision, she saw a tall figure dismount from a chestnut stallion. His silhouette blocked the setting sun, casting a long shadow over her crumpled form. "I'm not worth the bounty," she whispered, her voice dry as the dust beneath her. "They'll only pay half if I'm dead." The man knelt beside her, and she saw his face clearly for the first time, weathered by sun and wind, yet younger than she expected, perhaps 30. His eyes, sharp and alert beneath the brim of his Stetson, assessed her wound with practiced efficiency. "I'm not a bounty hunter, madam," he said, removing his bandana to press against her wound. "Name's Quentin Yates. I run cattle about 10 miles north of here." "How fortunate, for both of us," she managed through gritted teeth before consciousness slipped away. When Valerie awoke, she lay on a soft bed in a sparsely furnished cabin. Moonlight streamed through a small window, illuminating the room just enough for her to make out a figure sitting in a chair nearby. "You've been out for hours," Quentin said, leaning forward. "Bullet just grazed you, but you lost blood. Fever's broken now." Valerie tried to sit up, wincing as pain shot through her side. "Why help me? You don't know what I've done." "I know enough," he replied, pouring water from a pitcher into a cup. 3 riders passed through earlier, asking if I'd seen a woman. Said she was wanted for murder and theft in Helena. Said she was distinctive looking. Valerie's hand unconsciously moved to her face, to the scars that traced from her temple down her neck, disappearing beneath her collar. In the dim light, she saw Quentin notice the gesture. "I told them I hadn't seen anyone," he continued, offering her the water. "Now, I don't make it my business to harbor criminals, but those men didn't have the look of lawmen to me." She took the cup with trembling hands. "They're not. They work for Victor Holcomb, the mining magnate. His son died in the fire that did this to me," she explained, gesturing vaguely at her scarred body. "He believes I said it deliberately." Quentin remained silent for a long moment. "Did you?" Valerie met his gaze steadily. "I was a housekeeper in his mansion. His son cornered me one night. When I refused him, he became violent. The lamp fell. The fire spread so quickly," her voice faltered. "I tried to save him, I swear I did, but Holcomb would rather see me hang than accept his son attacked a servant." Dawn broke across the eastern hills as Quentin finished tending to the horses. 3 days had passed since he'd found Valerie, and though her wound was healing, he knew she wasn't telling him everything. He'd seen the way she startled at small sounds, how her eyes constantly searched for escape routes. He returned to the cabin to find her dressed, her few belongings gathered. "Going somewhere?" he asked, removing his hat. "I've imposed long enough," she replied, not meeting his eyes. "Those men will return. Your kindness shouldn't cost you your life." Quentin set down the pail of milk he'd carried in. "You can barely ride." "I've survived worse." "I don't doubt it," he said quietly. He stepped closer and she tensed. "Miss Everett, I have a proposition. I need help around this place, cooking, mending, general keeping. Winter's coming and I'll be busy with the herd. Stay here, earn your keep, and when spring comes, if you still want to leave, I'll give you money and a good horse." Valerie studied him suspiciously. "What do you really want, Mr. Yates?" His expression remained earnest. "Just what I said, and perhaps some company through the long winter nights, conversation, nothing more." After a long pause, she nodded once. "Until spring, then." The arrangement suited them both. Quentin kept to his word, never pressing for more than she offered. By day, Valerie cooked and cleaned, surprising herself with how easily she fell into the routine. By night, they sat before the fire, and slowly, story by story, she revealed pieces of herself. She told him of growing up in Boston, the daughter of a seamstress who died of consumption. How at 18, with no prospects, she journeyed west seeking work. How the Holcomb household had seemed a blessing until that fateful night. In return, Quentin shared his own past the son of a Virginia gentleman farmer who'd lost everything in the war between the states. How he'd drifted west, working cattle drives until he saved enough to claim this land. "You ever miss Virginia?" she asked one evening as snow fell gently outside. "Sometimes," he admitted, "but there was nothing left for me there. This land, harsh as it is, offers something Virginia couldn't anymore, a future that's mine to shape." Valerie stared into the flames. "I had dreams once, now I just want to stop running." Quentin watched her profile, the way the firelight caught on her scars. "Those men, Holcomb's men, they called you broken," she stiffened. "People see what they want to see." The first blizzard of winter howled around the cabin in early December, bringing with it a piercing cold that seeped through the log walls. Valerie woke to find Quentin adding wood to the dying fire, his breath visible in the frigid air. "Worst storm in years," he commented, rubbing his hands together. "We'll need to check on the cattle in the north pasture once it passes." She nodded, pulling her blanket tighter. "We could lose many, it's possible, but they're hardy stock." He sat across from her, like their owner. Valerie smiled slightly. These moments, the quiet understanding between them, had become precious to her. She'd never expected to find peace in this rough country, much less with a man who asked for nothing but offered everything. 2 days later, when the storm finally abated, they rode out together to check the herd. The landscape had transformed into a vast white expanse, beautiful and deadly. They found most of the cattle huddled in a sheltered draw, but several had strayed. "There," Quentin pointed to dark shapes against the snow. "Let's bring them in before nightfall." As they worked to round up the strays, Valerie felt alive in a way she hadn't in years. The exhilaration of riding, the purpose in their task, it reminded her that beyond survival lay living. They were herding the last few animals when Valerie's horse stepped into a snow-covered hole. The horse screamed, stumbling, and Valerie was thrown. She landed hard, the world spinning as pain shot through her shoulder. Quentin was beside her instantly. "Are you hurt?" She sat up gingerly. "Just my pride, and perhaps my shoulder." He helped her stand, his hands strong and sure. For a moment they stood close enough that she could see the concern in his eyes, feel the warmth of his breath. Something unspoken passed between them, something that had been building since that first night. "We should get back," she said, breaking the spell. He nodded, helping her mount his horse while he led her limping mare. As they rode double, his arms around her to hold the reins, Valerie allowed herself to lean back against his chest. For the first time in years, she felt protected rather than trapped. Christmas approached, bringing with it a kind of tentative joy to the cabin. Valerie fashioned simple decorations from pine boughs and dried berries. Quentin returned from a trip to the nearest town with small presents, a length of blue ribbon for her hair, coffee beans, and a book of poetry. "I've never much cared for celebrations," he admitted on Christmas Eve as they sat before the fire. "But this year feels different." Valerie understood. "Because we're not alone." He looked at her then, really looked at her, in a way that made her want to hide and be seen all at once. "Valerie," he said softly, using her given name for the first time. "I know when spring comes you might still choose to leave. But I want you to know," a pounding at the door cut him off. They froze, exchanging alarmed glances. No one visited this remote cabin, especially not in winter. Quentin rose, motioning for her to stay back as he reached for his rifle. "Who's there?" he called. "Open up, Yates." A gruff voice responded. "We need shelter. Storm's coming back." Quentin cracked the door, rifle ready. 3 men stood there, snow covering their heavy coats. With a sinking heart, Valerie recognized them, Holcomb's men. "Garrett," Quentin acknowledged the leader, his voice neutral. "Didn't expect to see you folks again." "Been tracking rustlers," Garrett lied smoothly. "Got caught by the weather. We'll be on our way once it clears." Quentin hesitated, then stepped aside. The code of the frontier was clear: no one turned away travelers in deadly weather, regardless of personal feelings. As they entered, stamping snow from their boots, Valerie kept her head down, but it was too late. Recognition dawned in Garrett's eyes. "Well, well," he drawled. "Seems we found more than shelter." Quentin moved between them. "She's under my protection, Garrett," the man smirked. "Holcomb's offering $500 for her return, dead or alive. She's not for sale." Tension crackled in the small cabin. The other two men spread out, hands hovering near their weapons. "Let's all keep calm," Quentin said evenly. "You're welcome to wait out the storm, food, coffee, warmth, but come morning you ride out alone." Garrett's eyes narrowed, but he nodded curtly. "For now." The night stretched endlessly, a silent battle of wills. Valerie and Quentin took turns sleeping, always keeping watch. When dawn broke, the storm had passed, leaving a crystalline world outside. "Time for you to move on," Quentin told the men as they finished a tense breakfast. Garrett stood slowly. "You're making a mistake, Yates. That woman's a murderer." "She's innocent," Quentin replied, "and I won't let you take her." The standoff might have ended there, but one of Garrett's men made a sudden move for his gun. Quentin reacted instantly, but Valerie was faster. The derringer she'd kept hidden in her skirt pocket barked twice. The man crumpled to the floor in the chaos that followed. Garrett drew his revolver, aiming at Valerie. Quentin lunged, tackling him. They crashed into the table as the third man pulled his weapon. Valerie grabbed Quentin's rifle, leveling it. "Drop it," she commanded, her voice steady despite her racing heart. The man hesitated, then complied. On the floor, Quentin had gained the upper hand, pressing his forearm against Garrett's throat. "You'll never be free of Holcomb," Garrett gasped. "He'll hunt you forever." "Then I'll face him," Valerie said, "but on my terms, not his." After disarming and binding the men, Quentin and Valerie faced a difficult decision. The nearest lawman was 2 days' ride away in the town of Cottonwood Creek. "I'll take them in," Quentin said as they stood outside, the men secured on their horses. "You stay here." Valerie shook her head. "No, this ends now. I'll face the sheriff, tell my story. If I keep running, Holcomb wins." "It's dangerous," he argued. "Your word against his a wealthy man with influence." "I have evidence," she admitted. "Something I took from the mansion that night, letters between Holcomb's son and others, things that prove what kind of man he was. I've kept them hidden, afraid to use them. But now." Quentin studied her, seeing the resolve in her eyes. "Then we go together." The journey to Cottonwood Creek tested them. January's bitter cold seeped into their bones despite heavy coats and blankets. They traveled slowly, keeping their prisoners secure while watching for signs of pursuit. On the second night, as they camped in a sheltered grove, Valerie woke to find Quentin sitting beside the small fire, his expression troubled. "What is it?" she asked, joining him. He stared into the flames. "I'm afraid for you if the sheriff doesn't believe your story." "Then I'll face what comes," she said simply, "but I'm tired of living in fear." Quentin took her gloved hand in his. "When I found you that day, bleeding against that boulder, I never imagined." He paused, searching for words. "You've brought something to my life I didn't know was missing." Valerie felt tears threaten. "And you've shown me that kindness still exists in this world. Whatever happens in Cottonwood Creek, I won't regret these months." He leaned forward, hesitating just a breath away. Valerie closed the distance, their lips meeting in a kiss that felt like coming home after a long journey. Cottonwood Creek emerged from the winter landscape the following afternoon, a small but bustling town that served the surrounding ranches and a nearby silver mine. As they rode down the main street, heads turned at the unusual sight of a woman and a cowboy escorting 2 bound men. The sheriff, a grizzled veteran named Harland Ross, listened to their story with skeptical attention. When Valerie produced the hidden letters, his eyebrows rose progressively higher. "These are disturbing," he acknowledged, leafing through them. "But Holcomb's a powerful man. It'll take more than this to charge him with anything." "I'm not asking for justice against Holcomb," Valerie said. "Just for the truth to be known about what happened that night, and for these men to face charges for attempting to kill us." Sheriff Ross sighed heavily. "I'll telegraph the marshal in Helena. Until then, I'll keep these two locked up." He eyed Valerie. "You should stay in town until this is sorted, both of you." As they left the sheriff's office, Quentin took Valerie's arm. "We'll get a room at the hotel. Tomorrow we can send a wire to my lawyer in Denver. He owes me a favor." Valerie stopped in the middle of the boardwalk. "You would do all this for me? Risk everything?" His expression softened. "Haven't you realized yet? I'd risk anything for you." The hotel room was simple but clean, with 2 beds and a washstand. After days on the trail, the prospect of hot water and clean sheets seemed like unimaginable luxury. "I'll see about getting us some supper," Quentin said, removing his hat. "Rest a while." When he returned an hour later with a tray of food, he found Valerie standing before the small mirror, her jacket and high-necked blouse removed. She wore only her chemise, exposing the network of scars that traced across her shoulders and down her back the legacy of the fire that had changed her life. She didn't turn, but met his eyes in the reflection. "This is what they see when they look at me, why they call me broken." Quentin set down the tray and crossed to her. Slowly, telegraphing his movements, he placed his hands on her shoulders. His fingers traced one of the scars with infinite gentleness. "They call me broken," she whispered, her voice catching. Quentin turned her to face him. He cupped her face in his calloused hands, his eyes never leaving hers. "I call you beautiful," he said, his voice husky with emotion. "I call you brave. I call you the woman I love." Valerie's eyes filled with tears. "How can you? How could I not?" He responded, wiping away a tear with his thumb. "These scars, they tell me you survived. They tell me you're stronger than whatever tried to destroy you." She leaned into his touch, allowing herself to believe, just for a moment, that such acceptance was possible. When he kissed her this time, it wasn't the tentative exploration of the previous night, but a promise of healing, of hope, of a future neither had dared imagine. The next morning brought complications. A telegram arrived from Helena. Victor Holcomb himself was en route to Cottonwood Creek. The news spread through town, bringing curious onlookers to the hotel where Valerie and Quentin took their breakfast. "We should leave," Valerie said, her food untouched. "This was a mistake." Quentin covered her hand with his. "Running now would only confirm guilt in everyone's eyes. We stay. We face him. You don't understand what he's capable of." "Perhaps not," Quentin admitted, "but I know what you're capable of, and you're not alone anymore." 2 days later, Holcomb arrived with an entourage, 2 lawyers from Helena and 4 private guards who barely disguised their true nature as hired guns. The town buzzed with excitement at the arrival of such a notable figure. Sheriff Ross organized a hearing in the town hall. The entire community seemed to attend, packing the benches and standing against the walls. At a table at the front sat Holcomb, a man in his 60s with cold eyes and an imperious bearing that belied his humble beginnings as a prospector. When Valerie entered with Quentin, Holcomb's gaze fixed on her with such hatred that she nearly faltered. But Quentin's steady presence beside her gave her the courage to walk forward and take her seat. The proceedings began formally enough, with the sheriff explaining the situation. When Valerie was called to speak, she rose on unsteady legs but found her voice growing stronger as she recounted the events of that terrible night 3 years ago. "I never intended harm," she concluded. "I was defending myself from attack. The fire was an accident and I tried to save Edward Holcomb. I've carried the guilt of failing him ever since." Holcomb surged to his feet. "Lies. All lies from a scheming servant girl who thought to elevate herself by seducing my son." His lawyer placed a restraining hand on his arm, but Holcomb shook it off. "My son was to be married to Catherine Astor of the New York Astors," he continued. "Why would he risk such a match for a scarred nobody?" The room fell silent at the cruel words. Then Quentin stood. "Mr. Holcomb," he said calmly, "Miss Everett has evidence of your son's character, letters he wrote to friends boasting of his conquests among the household staff. Letters that suggest this wasn't the first time he'd forced himself on a woman." Holcomb's face reddened. "Forgeries." I demand to see these supposed letters. The sheriff produced them from his desk. As Holcomb scanned the pages, his expression shifted from rage to shock to a cold calculation. These prove nothing, he said finally, though with less conviction. One of the lawyers, seeing the changing tide, whispered urgently in Holcomb's ear. After a moment, Holcomb nodded curtly. "It seems," the lawyer addressed the room, "that there may have been a misunderstanding. Mr. Holcomb has only sought justice for his son's death, but if indeed it was an accident as Miss Everett claims." "An accident caused by his son's attack on her," Quentin interjected. The lawyer cleared his throat. "Perhaps a resolution can be reached that serves all parties." By evening, an agreement had been negotiated. In exchange for Valerie signing a document stating the fire was an accident with no malicious intent, Holcomb would withdraw all claims against her and call off his men. He would make a public statement clearing her name. "It's not perfect justice," Sheriff Ross told them as they left the town hall, "but it's freedom. Sometimes that's the best we can hope for out here." As they stood on the boardwalk outside, Valerie felt a weight lift from her shoulders, a burden she'd carried so long she'd forgotten what it was to stand straight. "What will you do now?" Quentin asked softly. "Spring's still months away, but our agreement." Valerie turned to him, seeing the uncertainty in his eyes. "Our agreement was that I would stay until spring, then decide. I've decided." She took his hands in hers. "If you'll have me, I'd like to stay, not as your housekeeper, as your wife." Joy transformed Quentin's face. "I've wanted to ask since Christmas, but I was afraid you'd think I was trying to trap you." "You've done nothing but set me free," she replied, reaching up to touch his face. "Free to choose, and I choose you." They were married a week later in the small church in Cottonwood Creek. The entire town attended, curious about the couple whose story had brought such excitement to their winter. Valerie wore a simple blue dress, her scarred arms proudly bare in the warm church. As they exchanged vows, Quentin's voice caught when he promised to cherish her in sickness and in health. His eyes said what words could not, that he cherished all of her, scars and all. Spring came early that year, the snow melting to reveal tender green shoots pushing through the earth. On their ranch, Quentin and Valerie expanded the cabin, adding rooms for the future they planned together. At night, they no longer needed excuses to share the same space, finding in each other's arms the peace both had sought for so long. One evening, as sunset painted the western sky in gold and crimson, they sat on the porch of their home, watching a new foal frolic in the pasture. "I never thought I'd have this," Valerie admitted, her head resting on Quentin's shoulder. "A home, safety, love." Quentin kissed her temple, his lips tracing the scar that ran from her hairline to her cheek. "You deserve all of it and more." She turned to face him, her eyes reflecting the dying light. "They used to call me broken," she said, no longer a whisper of shame but a statement of fact. "But you taught me that broken things can be rebuilt into something stronger." "Not broken," he corrected gently. "Beautiful, always beautiful." As darkness fell across the Montana prairie, the lights of their cabin glowed warm and inviting, a beacon of hope in a harsh land. Proof that even in the wild frontiers of America, love could flourish in the most unexpected places, healing wounds deeper than any physical scar.